It's an abomination when you put others above him. We are to love him with everything. All your strength, might, being, etc. You're to love him. You start putting others, are you really loving him with everything if you put others ahead of him? If you're trying to please others instead of trying to please him? Are you trustworthy then to be a good servant if you're going to be listening to and following somebody else when he trusted you to do what he said? I mean, ultimately, that's what he's trusting you to do, right? Exodus 19, the covenant, he's trusting you to do what he said. Whatever it is that he says, he's trusting you to do it. Now, of course, when you do what you want and goes against what he said, now we have a problem. This is an abomination to him. Abomination being the lowest level of he doesn't like it, okay? When he calls something an abomination, it's at the real, that's the lowest thing you can do. The reign of Elohim is being announced. What is he announcing? Could it be in the context here? Now again, he uses the reign of Elohim in lots of ways, right? The kingdom of Elohim, he uses that in lots of places, lots of ways. How is he using it here? The reign of Elohim is being announced and everyone is doing violence upon it. He's talking about authority. He says the authority structure is being announced. And yet, and by the way, the Torah and the prophets are all the way until Yochanan, until John, are all doing the same thing. Repent and get yourself back in line with the covenant. He says, but everyone is doing violence. What's violence? Well, when you choose you over him, that's doing violence to what he said. Okay? Then he says, verse 17, which is the last verse I want to go to here, says, and it is easier for heaven and the earth to pass away than for one tittle of the Torah to fail. And that includes the covenantal stuff. He says, look, if you obey, I will do all these things. You are a manager in the kingdom. You are. You know what you're supposed to manage? You. That's your first and only responsibility is in management. You're managing a company of one, all right? And your staff and employment people that are in your management is you. Now, how do you manage? He says, you are trustworthy in little. What does that mean? I've given you authority over something, but yet not any authority to do whatever you want. I've given you authority over something to see if you'll do what I want done with it. Now, I'm not saying those of you who legitimately are using medical marijuana, but most of you aren't. Okay, and don't tell me you are and you need 5 friends to hang out with you while you do it and they do it too. That's not medical. Okay? When I have cold flu symptoms, I don't invite 5 people over when I take my NyQuil. Or if I have a headache and I'm going to take some Advil, I don't need, let's have a group Advil. Here, pass them around. So don't tell me that's medicinal. Growing up means managing yourself and being trustworthy in that so that you can be managed by him. You got to manage yourself. I would say that's the number one thing that if I had to label everything we counsel is people and their inability to manage themselves. Elder's nodding his head, okay? I mean, that would be the label. Whether it's their health or their wealth or their relationships, it's an inability to manage themselves. They think it's an inability to manage something outside of themselves, but it's not. It's your inability to manage yourself that's causing all the problems. Okay? And you need to own that and understand. Look, we've talked about this over and over again. You are primarily responsible for all aspects of your life. I'm going to add a little bit. As the manager of your life, you have to strengthen this muscle to override this muscle. The emotional muscle is a very strong one. You know why? Because you let it run rampant all the time, unrestricted. Whereas the mind, you don't do a whole lot to exercise it. When do you make the effort to exercise it? Because you know what happens? When you need the strength of mind, you run to a drug, you run to depression, you run to anxiety, you run to some other place instead of just saying, no, I'm not going to let this start running wild, my emotions. I'm going to rule over this. I'm going to manage me. There's always, everybody's in the middle. You know why even the bottom of the bottom's in the middle? Because he has to manage himself. Okay? So you're under authority and you have authority. That's what I mean by the middle. Nobody's above the Father. Everybody's below him. So he's managing everybody else. But even if there's nobody below you, there's still you're managing. So you're expected to be under authority and have authority. Are you good at it? And are you trustworthy at it? And are you doing it? We'll get to this when we get to the next part, okay? When we get to servant, are you doing it as a servant to the one above you? And what you're doing serving the master while you're now managing so that it all goes down, so everyone is inspired to do the same thing and serve the master. The manager was wasting his possessions. He was wasting or squandering what was given to him to have authority over. Are you wasting, squandering what the Father's given you? When I say what he's given you, I'm not talking about jobs, careers. I'm saying are you wasting? He's given you life. Are you squandering that life? Are you wasting that life? Or are you doing something to manage it to get the most functional, whatever would be pleasing him out of it? What are you doing with this thing he gave you? It's called life. He gave you life and said, here you go. Let's see what you do with it. And then I'm going to put all kinds of people and situations in your life to see what you do with it. How you manage those situations, how you manage you in those situations. What if we just looked at it differently as the expectations of Yahweh? What is the Torah? It's telling us what his expectations are. So when he says it's easier for the heaven and earth to pass away than the expectations of Yahweh to fall, I mean. In other words, they're not going to go away. His expectations are always going to be his expectations. He doesn't change. Now look, the relationship teachings that I have done, and we've done many, okay? In those relationship teachings, haven't I taught you one of the most important things to do in any relationship, not just marriage or children, it could be any relationship, employee with an employer or friends, anything. It's expectations. The success of a relationship is going to be on how successful you are in setting proper expectations so that everybody involved knows what's expected. You know what gets you success? Desire. You know what gets you in trouble? Desire. Same thing. It's about what you desire, though. You desire a good thing, then you're going to have the drive and the fuel to go get the good thing. You desire a bad thing, you're going to have the drive and the fuel to get the bad thing. Desire is neutral. In other words, it could be used in any way, shape, or form. It could be for good or bad. It's just a desire. And what leads to all kinds of problems? It says you crave and have not. You desire and have not, so then you go and get in all kinds of trouble. We've read that verse. And this is where we get in the biggest trouble. So if you're going to want to hear those words, well done, good and trustworthy servant,